with hunting season, we wanted to do a video of how to cut up a deer. So this is a quarter deer that we had come in. I'm gonna do the back straps first, and then we'll do the legs and stuff after. So this customer only wants steaks and then the burger ground. So I'm gonna cut all of the steaks, but I'm also gonna do roasts because then you could just cut them into steaks after. So first what I'm gonna do on these back straps, I'm gonna go through and clean off any of this dry or any hair that is on there. I'm gonna try to take as little off as possible. So keeping everything as clean. I don't want any of this stuff in the burger. Clean all of this up, make sure everything stays nice and clean. So on this silver skin, I'm gonna cut just one piece down to start, because all of the silver skin is gonna come off. So I'm just gonna cut with like the first inch of my knife. And then as I'm cutting, I'm gonna tilt my knife up toward that silver skin so that I'm not cutting into the meat, and the only thing I'm pulling off is that silver skin. So pulling just that silver skin out, a little bit more tender, not so gristly. Okay, so now I'm going to do butterfly medallions out of this. So I'm going to cut almost all the way through and then all the way through after. So I'm going to keep those sides even. So that the steaks are the same size all the way around. Same thing with the next one. Trim off any of the dry, anything that's dirty. piece of trim. Trim that sirloin. Little top sirloin, cut those steaks out of. Little medallions. Okay, so back leg. So the top sirloin, that was the top sirloin piece from this other leg. So this top sirloin piece, there's a seam right here that you can cut into. You can see that seam, it goes right up to right where the ball of that is. And then you're gonna cut this square off from there. And then you can clean off where the mouthpiece is. And then this would be the culotte. So we're just going to clean that up, put that into trim. It's a little small for our steaks. And that'll go into these steaks. And then on here, this is the sirloin tip. The tri-tip actually sits right here. Sometimes they'll be on there depending on how well they quarter them. But this, I'm just gonna cut this tri-tip end off and put this into trim. This is the tri-tip that sits right on the front, right there. Put that in the trim. So right here from the knee to where the hip is, I'm gonna go straight down there to open this seam up. This is gonna pull off the tip roast. I'll just cut right along the femur. And then up and around where the kneecap is. And I'm only cutting again with like that front inch of my knife. And I'll roll around right here. And I can flip this over. There's another seam line right there. So I'm going to cut just barely through that seam line so that I can pull this open. And then I'll finish cutting this tip off on there. And then I'm going to cut all of this silver skin off. And anything that's dry. And then to clean this up, there's a few seams on here. So I'll cut these down to get this as a nice even little roast. So we'll turn that into a roast. We can cut some of the silver skin off as well. Some of that will cook out on these pot roasts. So you don't have to be super particular about it, where I'm gonna cut these into steaks after. I wanna take some of that silver skin off. So there's a roast out of that tip. The rest of this is just a little bit of trim. Then the next roast is gonna come off. I'll just take this whole leg out. I like to put the end of the leg right kind of in my lap. It helps me maneuver this leg around and keeps everything from sliding around on the table. I'll pull that shank off, and the shank meat. just going to take the middle of this shank meat out. If you go too low down into here, a lot of times this gets really gristly and it's not very good. So I'll just take middle of that shank meat out. Then once you take that femur, then this kind of opens up. You'll be able to see a seam right in here. So with your knife, just cut and follow those natural seams. So this is the inside round. This is the heel. That will just go into grind. There's a little gland and triangle of fat right here that you want to make sure you take out. There's a gland inside of here that wouldn't taste very good. So you'll take all of that out. And then this is the eye of the round that sits right here. And then this is the bottom flat where your rump roasts come from. So with it being a deer, and it's not very big, I'm going to cut this into a roast. I'm going to take off this silver skin on this side that's going to be really tough. That same technique of turning my knife in and running up that silver skin. I'll square the end off and square this end off. And then this can be a nice little roast. Take this fat off. So that'll be a roast. And then this is another nice little roast. So I'll cut all these roasts and then we'll go back and then we'll cut them into steaks. So that way you can either leave them as a roast or you can continue processing them into steaks. So all of these, you just want to cut any of that dry off, and then anything that might have any hair or anything like that, just so it doesn't get in your burger. Try and cut minimal so that you're not taking any of your meat. Okay, so this top round, there's a little cap that you want to peel off. Just cut down this seam. And then that cleans that top round off. So there's another nice little roast. So we can run through the same one. This other leg. Take off the tip. And this one is missing a lot more. So it's going to end up just being burger. This side, instead of taking the leg off of the meat, I'm going to take the meat off the leg. So again, took that femur off. We're going to open up this seam. A lot of that you can just do with your hands, just pulling stuff apart. Gonna make sure you don't cut the meat, so you're gonna be using your knife just to push those seams apart rather than trying to cut them apart. Pull out that triangle, cut off this heel. Okay, there's another little roast. So the cleaner you keep everything on the mountain, the more meat you're going to end up with. Okay, front shoulders. So I always start on the inside. I'm going to take off any of this extra fat. Clean up any of the hair. Okay, so my first cut, I'm going to cut right down to the paddle bone on this side to find both of these edges. So pulling this underblade off is just going to clean up this paddle bone. And then I'm going to mark on both sides and follow this up and follow the humerus to the elbow and then around. Okay, cut all of this meat down. I'm going to flip it over. So now that I've wrapped all of that along the back, cut up on this side of this ridge bone. And then I'm going to cut hard against the ridge bone right there. And then I can just grab all that meat that I just cut from here. I'm just going to grab and use as a handle. And then I'm just going to peel it right off that paddle bone. So that'll clean all of that off. Then I'll cut this shank meat up again from the bottom. The lower you get into all those tendons, it gets really not very good. So now this piece, I've got flat iron sitting right here, the shoulder clod sitting right here, this little mock tender sitting right here. So I'll trim the rest of this stuff out. So most of the shoulders are basically good for grind. You do jerky and a bunch of other stuff out of it. So with this flat iron, I'm going to clean this flat iron piece off. Some of the bone skin. And then I'm going to cut on this end to give me a little bit of a handle. And I'm going to cut in right here so I can put my finger in there. Now I'm going to push my knife down against that tendon, and then I'm going to wiggle my knife back and forth to get that flat iron piece off. And I can flip it over and do the same thing on the back. So even though these are really small on a deer, I still save them as steaks because they're still a pretty good steak. You do the same thing on an elk, and then I would just cut them in half. But on deer, I'm going to leave these just like this, so that these are just two steaks. And then the shoulder clod piece, I'm just going to clean up and then grind as well. Okay, so another shoulder, do that same thing going through. There's a little bit of the neck meat. I'm going to clean all this stuff up first. cutting these into steaks. Just as it sits as a roast, I'm gonna go across. It's just simple as that. Those will all be steaks. There's the flat irons. These are all back straps. Those are the top sirloins. So on these, I'm gonna cut the eye of the round off. Since I'm not doing roasts on this one. And I'll butterfly these the same way I did those back straps. So here's both of those eye of the rounds. Nice little medallion steak. We cut them thicker. Sometimes we'll put bacon around them to help give them a little bit of flavor. And then on these rump roasts, I cut that eye of the round off of this side right here. So I'm going to take that seam out, and then these ones I'm going to cut lengthwise. So these will cut square down, so that these make nice little steaks that way. So there's a seam on here that comes across that you can see. This is where the eye of the round attaches right here. So I'll cut this seam out, so that way I just have a solid piece. And then you can see the grain running this way. So that's why I cut them down this way. Keep those steaks nice. And then these inside rounds, there's a seam right here you can peel off. I know some guys will like to cut this little piece. I usually don't keep a lot of these. Well, that one's okay. Sometimes they end up being really small. So, and then I'll pull. Grain runs this way again. So I'm gonna pull these off. These are all round steaks. So again, on this inside round, this seam right here comes off real easy. I'll cut this piece off first. Cut these in to that size, or I can butterfly them as well. Or you can maximize your steaks off. And I'll just cut these across the grain into steaks again. You can leave those two pieces together and cut them, but if you do, you'll end up with a steak that has a seam, kind of like that, which is totally fine, but as it cooks, sometimes it falls apart. So that's why I usually cut those, so that way you can just get individual pieces out of all of those. So that is a quarter deer all cut into steaks. So you've got the sirloin steaks that are right here, all of the back straps, the flat irons, the tip steaks, the eye of the round steaks, the regular round steaks or top round steaks, and these are bottom round steaks or that come out of the rump. So that's it.